What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lightweight Strength Academy podcast, Season 1. In this season, we are continuing to discuss our topic, a faith-based case for health and fitness. And particularly in this episode 2, we're discussing fitness for the kingdom, what fitness was intended to be for the Christian in his or her service to God. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Share this episode with those who you think could benefit from it. And also, thank you if you're tuning in again. And if you're tuning in for the first time, we welcome you as well. Without any further ado, we'll hop right into the episode. We're going to talk about in episode 2, this idea of fitness for the kingdom, what fitness was intended to be for the Christian in his or her service to God. Something that's interesting about this part to me, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. Let's talk about what is fitness. But before we do that, have you ever just looked at the concept of fitness? Fitness, the concept has evolved so significantly throughout history, just reflecting on changes in culture, changes in society, changes in individual priorities. And it's sort of it doesn't just encompass the physical strength and endurance anymore, but it's sort of kind of inclusive of this overall ability of our bodies to function effectively in daily life. And so now I know, I was just reading the other day, people are starting to include mental health into physical fitness. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on that. And as we prepare to answer the first question, what is physical fitness?
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of it evolving over the years. I was just thinking, was my first introduction or understanding of what fitness is or was. And I think I was taught in school, it was wrapped around the Olympics and just the concept of playing games and being in shape for sports. But just the general idea of what fitness is the state of, I guess, a person being in shape, whether that's from a health-related or a more skill-related type of fitness. But yeah, it definitely has evolved now more to include more than just, the way you look, or you have a clean bill of health from a physical standpoint, to more of the behavioral aspect side of it too. As you know, there are plenty of people walking around who look great, but we would peel through the layers and be able to take a peek into their brain, their life, the things they have concerns of. It's not fit. So those are my immediate thoughts on that.
It's interesting that you mentioned people, it's not looking, it's more than just about how you look, but just your mental health, because you can see people that are, I see them all the time in the gym, these guys that are super jacked, and indoor females, and they come in and you just never know what's going on inside of their heads. What story do they have? What struggles are they going through? And is physical fitness their outlet from that? What does it mean to them? So I think body composition has a lot to do with that too, as we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth.
I remember when I was in junior high and high school, you have the fitness proficiency tests. You have your pull-ups, you have your sit-ups, you have your stretching, you have all that. It kind of weeded out it made the less physically fit ones in the group feel bad, right? And they never looked forward to gym class. And so that could create this ongoing mentality of, well, maybe I don't need to do this. I'll find other ways of interacting with my peers. But I think even before that, just society in general was a lot more active. Getting outside, there's less alternatives. So you get outside and you play. And then as society and culture develops over time, you have, more of a shift to indoors and more of a shift into social media and consuming things on a device, which I don't think there's anything inherently bad about, but you could go a whole day without, getting outside and touching grass. And then you see people in the gym who are these monsters, right? They're trapped so big, they touch their ears and can't fit through doorways and all that. But ask them, how good is your mile run, right? Can you go up 3 flights of stairs without being out of breath? As they don't see the need to incorporate it, right? And so I think the demands in society, but also expectations of society now, have contributed to us taking kind of breaks in physical fitness.
I believe that fitness is kind of, it's progressing, or it's changing, and the reasoning and intention behind it is changing in some ways. But also, again, I also think it's very relative. So I think people have different reasons for why they train. I think Maurice hit that. I think we all talked about that a little bit in the beginning of the first episode with, you don't have to train like us because we all have different goals. Fitness is definitely a relative thing. I think fitness is also functional. So even if you're not in sports, you got to really think about the things that you need while you're training. So it's definitely it's different for different people. And also it's very important. I think the mental is definitely important too. We don't need to just look at fitness being the physical, but I think it's very important to look at your mental, because most of the time if your mental's not there, you're not going to really want to do the physical side of it too. So I think it's all encompassing.
Well, that was perfect. I'm sure you all have gotten the same thing. Every time I receive like a new client, especially at the beginning of the year, and I say, what is your goal? And if they say something like weight loss, but I usually hear something like, oh, I'm trying to get toned. I want to get fit. I want to get that 6-pack for the summer. And then I'll ask like, okay, well, how do you expect to get your 6-pack?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, I know you got this cool, I've seen some cool like ab exercises on YouTube, stuff like that. I'm like, that's not going to get
the truth.
I said, are you ready for this, right? And I'm like, your nutrition plays like up to 90% like of you getting abs. Like you can do as many bicycle crunches, all the core work you want to do. It has some benefit, but as far as like the genetic concept, the genetic side of things and nutrition is going to yield the most benefit as far as like having abs. One of the things that I wanted to point out. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, what's the quote? You can't outrun about a bad diet. Right?
Yep.
You could do all the cardio you want, but if your nutrition is not right, hate that.
Yep. That's true. Look, in fact, something that's interesting? I think I came across Malcolm Gladwell's book on, was it the 10,000 hour rule, I think, or something like that?
Yeah.
But there was and of course he's mentioning that, I think that's where the quote, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I think I read, I can't even remember the guy's name who wrote it, but they were studying a tribe called the Hatsi tribe in Africa, I think. I think he's from Duke University, but he actually challenged the belief like, oh, you can outrun a bad diet now I don't think it's possible in our culture because, I mean, we are mostly sedentary. But if you live in like a, predominantly a culture that still forages for food and stuff like that, then maybe, I guess, depending on how many calories you burn a day, because at the simplistic, like bottom line, it's like calories in versus calories out. That's essentially how you lose weight. Now I know it's a little bit more complex, but just simplistically putting it. The part I kind of wanted to point out as far as like this fitness, I just wanted to dig into the origin piece a little bit. So like the origin of physical fitness, it can be traced back, and I think Destiny mentioned it too, to the ancient Greeks, and even a little bit before them to the Egyptians. The Egyptians, they had a somewhat structured physical activity plan that was considered sport and entertainment. In fact, I read that the pharaohs would have to go through a rigorous training protocol in order to see whether or not they were fit to lead. And again, you can please and everyone's listening, please, fact check me on that, because again, I heard that and I thought that was interesting. But with the ancient Greeks, of course, they introduced structured training for competitive athletes. We know with the Olympics and all of that stuff coming out, all of that was very interesting. And so it's funny to me how they looked at the idea of being both physically fit and smart as one and the same. And so to them, it was like, all right, well, I believe that it's not only important to be physically fit, but also to be smart. And so that's where you have the integration between physical fitness and also the mental health side of things. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, as far as like what the Greeks did, because just my opinion, I think they did it right. Just integrating the physical side and the mental health side. What's your thoughts on that?
As far as the Greeks are concerned, I know they were really more on the vein side of it. So more of the kind of how we look at it, the bodybuilding side of things right now. If we look at relative, to current, culture. But I definitely do. I think they were very in tune with the mental side of it too. You even look at art fans. So you kind of even look at the art that goes in with it too. They were very infatuated with the soul and heart, the mind, body, body, mind, and soul, all that things, So I think they all, with that being said, just looking at Greek culture alone and just art and poetry and all the stuff that was involved in their culture, it is very important. to have all encompassing as far as fitness and health is concerned.
And I agree. I think that's part of, like, you can see the Romans kind of took their idea, and I hesitate to say the Romans perfected what the Greeks did, but in a way they did, because the Greeks left such a powerful example of health and fitness. And so when the Romans finally got to the point where, now they're the world power and they take on a lot of the things that the Greeks had implemented, they began to perfect a lot of it to the point where you think about like a Roman soldier, anyone a part of the Praetorian Guard. I mean, these were the elite of the elite, and their physical training was not to be laughed at. And so when I look at it from that perspective, the origin of physical fitness, it traced back pretty far. But then the definition is what's interesting to me. Like today, as we mentioned in like setting up the question, the fitness has taken on this multifaceted approach to where like it includes obviously those things like cardiovascular endurance, strength training, flexibility, but then we mentioned the mental health side of stuff. I had a book that I referenced, and the book is entitled Fitness for Life. It's by Charles Carbon and a man named Guy. And they particularly broke down physical fitness into 11 parts. And then they put it into two categories, health-related and skill-related. And I'm curious to your thoughts on this. I'm just going to lay it out how they have it in the book. So they have health-related, consists of 6 parts of physical fitness that reduces the risk of chronic disease and helps us function during daily activities. And those 6 parts are body composition, cardiorespiratory endurance, flexibility, muscular endurance, muscular power, muscular strength. So I want to start with the first one. What's the significance of like something like body composition? Like, why do people need to care about, or should people care about body composition?
I actually teach this in it sounds like the book I used for my lifetime wellness class.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about it.
And body composition is the makeup of what a person is made up of, right? In terms of their body fat, their fat mass, their fat-free mass. And that's pretty much what's left, right? Your hair, skin, your nails, your muscle, and your fat, pretty much. So there's tons of research that shows if we have too much of one thing, it increases our risk for various types of diseases, diabetes, osteoporosis. So if we have too much fat mass, it increases our risk for that. But even on the flip side, though, if we have too much fat-free mass, right, on the opposite end, if we have too much muscle and not enough body fat, we can have issues with that as well. So there are these healthy ranges of how much body fat we should have and how much fat-free mass we should have. So it's important. God has designed our bodies to have this good range of where we keep ourselves healthy so that, we can serve him. And the ranges, I would throw some ranges out there, but they seem to change and they seem to be so different. So I don't want to throw the numbers out there.
Every year or two, like it changes. Oh my goodness. Destiny, you want to add to that?
No, that's pretty much what I would say too. Because the book that we studied in college, it was exactly what we had to look at, and that's pretty much it. You have your body composition, and it's very, very. You look at the basis. I think we talked about the last time with it being the BMI. We look at our BMI first, and that's just kind of real basic and real generalized. But again, you look at it as relative. Are you in shape? Is your body composition according to an athlete, or is it according to just what you need to do just to be healthy in general? So
right. That's how I kind of looked at it too. Like, so I still, like, when people look at the BMI chart and they try to get a general idea of, am I healthy? And I always try to point out, like, I'm like, all right, you can, to me, I think it's fine to like reference it as just a general layout. So you can have just some idea, at least be within the ballpark range. But of course, like for me, like I actually go and, I've done like underwater weighing, which I think is the gold standard. It does cost, and I don't feel like jumping in a tank every time. But with that, or they have like these very cool machines now where you can do like the in-body scan.
Mm-hmm. That's what we have at our gym.
Yeah, we have one in ours too, and they have like what is it? It starts with a D. I think it's like DEXA. Yeah, DEXA scan. Yeah. So I know people can do that too if they're interested in just knowing about the body composition, but it is important. And then the next
side note on that one real quick, just to give some people some tidbits. Important thing with body composition, definitely make sure that you use the same, no matter what, the DEXA, the in-body, just a scale in general. Make sure you use the same one when you're measuring. If you're going to give yourself a 6-month goal, to make sure you're using that same machine or whatever every time, because you can't weigh yourself at the gym and then weigh yourself at home, and then there may be a slight 2 to 3 pound difference and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind too. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the
Yeah,
discrepancy.
and if I can add on that with the BMI didn't start in the health and fitness industry. BMI started in insurance, life insurance in particular, as a way for them to kind of measure, well, if your height and your weight is this, then you're more of a risk for us. So therefore, we're going to charge you more for your life insurance. And eventually that just morphed into the fitness arena. So a lot of people that I know they have no respect for BMI whatsoever.
Yeah.
When I teach in my classes, I'll say something along the lines of BMI can be helpful for some people, but I'll use myself as an example. My BMI, like a healthy BMI, is 24.99 down to like 18.9 or 17.99, something like that. Somewhere between 18 and 25. And I tell people my BMI is at 27, 28. And then I'll ask them, do you think I'm like unhealthy or unfit? They're like, oh, no, Professor Wynn, no, I'm like, well, why is that? It's because I'm short, right? I'm 5'8 3/4. I'm 5'9", but I weigh between 190 and 195 pounds. So that puts my BMI apparently I am overweight or at risk for these metabolic type diseases. And I'll say, well, but if you take my body fat, right, my body fat's relatively low for a guy who's, 48 years old. So which one do I use? I say, well, for myself, I'm going to use body fat. But for someone else who is they're not as short and they are overweight, then yeah, BMI should be helpful. I mean, you should be able to use BMI, and you should consider BMI as a good tool for you as to whether your body composition is good or not.
So one question I wanted to pose to both of you that I actually received about 2 weeks ago. So do you think it would be appropriate for a person, so athletes, right? Would you say that athletes should use BMI, or would you be more inclined to reference the everyday 9-to-5 person to BMI?
I hate to keep saying it depends. It really does. It really just about what you need. It's a good starting point. I mean, because you can start off with your BMI. I mean, we did have to have a BMI pretty low whenever we were playing college basketball. I mean, I've also had to do BMIs. I know at the YMCA when I used to work in Lakeland, Florida, they had an incentive for the Lakeland Regional Hospital there that everybody had to have a BMI, bring their BMI below 30 or below 29 or something like that in order to get like some kind of perk that they're having for the job. So, it was because, you're working long shift, long hours, and you have to be running around the hospital. So they wanted people to be healthy. Their BMI was kind of like the broad thing that they can measure everybody. So I think that would be considered general health for, not to say nurses and doctors are not athletes, but, they're definitely high performing people. But for athletes, I don't know. I think it really just depends on what you do. Because, like I said, I've been on both sides of the spectrum as an athlete. I'm powerlifting now, but I used to play basketball full time, and the physical fitness is completely different. Like I said, my BMI is way higher now, considered obese right now as a professional powerlifter. But at playing basketball, I mean, I had 15% body fat at the most, running suicides every day, 2 miles every day. It's not the same. My BMI was perfect, I guess, back then. So it's a little different.
And I would say for that very reason, which you just stated, Destiny, that BMI, generally speaking, is not good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not relative to what they are doing. I mean, if they're doing a particular sport that's going to require them an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, I mean, we don't even have to do the numbers. We know their BMI is going to be high, right? And I mean, we're laughing not because we're laughing at them, but because we know what it requires for their position. Even if they're like solid, right? They're solid. There are some defensive linemen, offensive linemen who are, 290, 300 pounds, and they may be at 10, 15% body fat. But when they do the BMI, because of their height and their weight, right? So which one are you going to take? So I would say, to answer your question, Daniel, athletes, I would say no, they shouldn't be using BMI.
So the next thing I wanted to get into just briefly is this idea of cardiorespiratory endurance, and then we can go to muscular strength, power, and endurance next. What are your thoughts on cardiorespiratory endurance? Like, should Christians be concerned with their cardiorespiratory fitness?
That was the biggest thing that we had to focus on in school. I mean, of course, we talk about different ways or scales of measurement for health and wellness and fitness. Cardiorespiratory strength, we had to do a whole bunch. Like there's a couple of different tests that we had to do. I know you probably remember, Maurice, but just like with the bike, what was that one called? You know what I'm talking about. We had to do like a couple of measurements with the bike, and that was all about our cardiorespiratory like
Is
endurance.
it the VO2 max with the bike?
Yes, the VO2 max. Yeah, and it's named after somebody, but so that was almost every week we were doing that, man. I thought I was gonna die just when we were doing lab studies, but it was just all about your risk of cardiorespiratory diseases, which is, we live life and people die or people are in the hospital daily about these things. And that was usually cardiorespiratory health is usually the number one thing that are kind of like the leading cause of death and things like that are relevant for health and wellness today. So
yeah, and a lot of that, what you just mentioned too, is again, like you're trying to mitigate these cardiorespiratory diseases that could result as, because you're not taking proper care of your cardiorespiratory endurance. And so I know a lot of people, it's a task for a lot of people to run. And so let's not even include running in the mix. What are just some practical exercises you can do to increase your cardiorespiratory and fitness that does not involve running? Because running just seemed to scare people for some reason.
I had a professor when I was in undergrad who said, no, this was back in the mid 90s. Yeah. Mid to late 90s, rather. He said people don't die from weak biceps. They die from weak hearts and weak lungs. And that has stuck with me since then, and I use that in my classes. I don't say that to undermine the importance of resistance training, but people are generally not going to have health issues if they're not bench pressing, if that makes sense. But they might have some issues, some health issues if they're not able to, walk up a flight of steps or something like that. Walk from, we're door knocking. Let's take it for Christians, and we're out door knocking, and we can only walk so many steps before we have to take a break. So one of the easiest ways, the easiest things that individuals can do that doesn't cost any money, all you need is space to be able to do it. Most people do have that, especially during times of the year where it's not like cold outside or whatever. It's just outside walking, or walking on a treadmill if they have access to a treadmill at home or in a gym or something along those lines. Yeah, so people don't have to run. I mean, you can do brisk walking, and there's tons of research that shows how the importance of brisk walking for not only weight loss, but also just for general health. So I would say that's probably the number one thing.
I remember back in the day, we did something called jumping jacks. I know it takes some coordination, but with some help, we could dust it off. And you just need something with your wingspan, right? I was going to say, just put yourself in a higher stress environment. That'll get the heart rate up, right? But that's not recommended either. So yeah, jumping jacks. Get yourself a jump rope, right? Do some bunny hops over a line on your driveway. Just something to where you have to stay consistent with it. Say for 30 seconds. That's not much, right? 30-second jump rope, 30-second bunny hops, something like that.
Yeah, I know people are pushing the HIIT training for a little bit, and I definitely am somebody that still uses that currently in my training. It's a little subtle way to get people into, running a little bit, and things like that, or even like you said, brisk walk. I mean, man, you get on there and like, hey, just nice casual stroll on the treadmill for a minute, and then we're going to go a little faster for a minute, and then your heart rate gets up and it'll come back down. So that way it's manageable for them. They don't feel like, oh, we're on an all-out sprint for a whole 30 minutes or anything like that. And you'll notice how we can start upping the time. Like you said, again, Richard, with 30 seconds. You start doing just 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off thing, and then build that up to we're doing 45 seconds on and off, then a minute, then 2 minutes, and things like that. And you will be able to measure it. You'll be able to measure. That's, we always talk about SMART goals. That's something that's measurable. Okay, and I can tell that I'm getting a little more cardio endurance because I can run a little longer than I used to be. So that's the biggest thing, and I think so.
Yeah, that's one thing too that I wanted to kind of piggyback off of is this idea that even though, like, when people hear that, they think running first, and of course, everyone just gave an example that doesn't involve running, and it works just as well, you know. And jump roping, Richard, that you mentioned, that's my wife's favorite mode of cardio. In fact, that's like
That
one
is
of the
a
only
lost
ways.
cause for some people.
It is, yeah. Like it is. Like I love. In fact, jump roping is my favorite mode of cardio. I love jump roping. It's fun to me. But you know, I found two things. Like older people, they love to walk, and in fact, at my job, I just implemented this challenge to them for the year 2025 because, you know, we got New Year's resolutions, right? So the plan of action is to walk across Nebraska. And of course, you give them this huge feat. And I'm thinking like, all right, are you guys going to walk across Nebraska? And I broke it down for them and gave them the numbers. And so Nebraska is about 430 miles long. And so if you think about there being approximately 2,000 steps in a mile, the total step count of around 860,000 miles is approximately the amount of steps they would need to have by May 31st. And so the reason we did from January 1st to May 31st is because the month of May is considered, I think, walking month or something like that. And there's a day in April that's considered, walking day. And so I thought it was fitting just to end, this feat in the month of May. And so I gave them the numbers and I scared them with the 860,000 steps. It's approximately how many steps they would have walked by the end. But I made it more manageable, right? We're using this thing called SMART goals. I think we'll get into that in a later episode. But getting into the thing called SMART goals, just making sure it's relevant, making sure it's specific, measurable, and attainable, and time efficient, of course. And so I put it to them this way. You have 2,000 steps, approximately in a mile. You have 151 days to accomplish 430 miles. So that's approximately 6,000 steps a day that you would need to take, which equals approximately 3 miles per day. And so, of course, now if you, for any reason you felt ill, you couldn't walk as much, you can double up on it, right? But again, just giving people an idea, like, here's the framework, the big picture is to walk across Nebraska. Let me make that measurable and manageable for me to be able to accomplish that. And we all have, for the most part, these things that track our steps. We got smartwatches and stuff like that. So really, I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to this stuff because we have so many tools that we can use, right? We have so many tools that we can use to better, aid us in our health and fitness goals. So any other thoughts you wanted to add to that part?
Yeah, I wanted to add in circuit training. Sometimes for those who, I hate cardio. Like, I don't like it whatsoever. I don't want walking is boring, that sort of thing. I'm definitely not running. I don't want to sit on a bike that doesn't move.
Out of all the people here, I thought you would be the one.
So yeah, circuit training, the research shows with circuit training, so circuit training is where you do a certain number of exercises in a row with very little, if any, rest in between. Typically, you're doing, anywhere from 12 to 20 reps. So let's say you'll do some push-ups, and then you'll do some pull-ups. You can do some lunges, you can do some squats, some bicep curls, and just naming some of the basic exercises. You can start with the larger muscle groups and go to the smaller muscle groups, or you can alternate. What's called peripheral hard action training. You can go from upper body to lower body, alternating back and forth between that. But that is a great way. Some of the research shows that it can almost mimic just true cardiovascular, cardiorespiratory training. So for those who don't want to go out and walk, but who like to lift weights, instead of taking rest in between, just go from set up a little circuit, and go from one exercise to another. And again, try not to take any rest. And if you do, keep the rest to like 30 seconds or less, and it can mimic cardio training.
I was going to joke around about that earlier. I was going to say, currently with me training for powerlifting, I was like, anything over 8 reps is cardio for me right now.
What?
Hey, I get that. You're right.
What
right.
the CrossFit person say?
Sure, you got long rest periods.
Right.
I think I heard it from a CrossFit friend. He asked him what he does for exercise. He said CrossFit. He said, what do you do for cardio? He says, I lift weights faster.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
that is. In fact, I was gonna go ahead.
I wanted to add, if you're too intimidated to go to the gym, there are a lot of other, we say alternative things just because we're speaking from personal training in a gym, but they're very valid forms of exercise. I mean, swimming itself is one of the highest forms of cardio that there is. It's great for your health. It's no impact on your joints. Getting in a pool and doing some swimming, that's one. I work at a rock climbing gym, and those are some of the fittest people I've ever seen. climbing up on the wall. You do bouldering, or with belay, it's with a rope attached to the top and you have a harness for it. Rock climbing is another great one. Go out kayaking. If you live in warmer weather, go out kayaking. There are all sorts of things that you can do where you don't need to go into a gym necessarily or have dumbbells and know how to swing a kettlebell, stuff like that.
I was going to add too, and correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't it be, I guess, a little bit more beneficial to add in the weight-specific cardio where you're doing like circuit training or something like that? Because you're not only taxing your heart rate, but then you're taxing things like your balance, your coordination, your mobility. Because I know when I'm tired, form is about to go out the window. It's like you gotta focus real hard on the form because it's like, your heart rate is just, it's beating so quickly. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, adding.
And so one of the things, yeah, go ahead.
Resistance to it, right? Whether it's body weight resistance through rock climbing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Also, we were talking about mental health being a form of fitness and recognize as fitness now. If you have a goal that you're accomplishing, instead of hitting the rep range or hitting your sets and hitting your percentages and all that, if you have a goal, it's like, I made it to this tree line. I made it to the top of this wall. I made it to this, 500 meters swimming or whatever it is. Once you hit a certain goal, then you have that dopamine rush, right? You have that in your brain telling you, hey, I did something. I accomplished something. That builds confidence, earned confidence, and not the fake stuff.
Well, I love that, boy. You're going to get some started with that, not the fake stuff. I'm telling you, that's true. That's true. That's true. All right, as we kind of shift gears a little bit, we're going to get into like some of the more practical spiritual application of physical fitness. So in today's fast-paced world, of course, we have the importance of physical fitness extending far beyond just the aesthetic. And I think we talked about that just in the previous question. So it extends far beyond the aesthetic appeal or health benefits. It plays a crucial role in, I would argue, shaping our character. And as you just mentioned, Richard, it's none of that fake stuff. Like you're gonna, if you accomplish especially a difficult, challenging workout, you can feel that you accomplished it through some of the hormone releases and things of that nature. And so I want to talk about this question: how can prioritizing physical fitness build the virtue of discipline? Yeah, this a deep one here. I love this one.
Well, you ask anybody that's ever been under me as a coach, or just a trainer in general, that is my favorite word, is discipline. And I just define it obviously as doing the right thing, doing it the right way, and doing it that way every single time, right? I have 7-year-old kids who can say that verbatim because I say that every day. So, man, it's, you do the reps, right? Everybody say perfect practice makes perfect, right? So that's the biggest thing with discipline, and how important it is to keep doing something and make sure you're doing it the right way. I mean, like I said, just start off with that.
And part of it is picking back off of what we talked about earlier with that quote that came from Malcolm Gladwell's book, or someone who read it made up the quote, "Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard."
Yep.
And I mean, you see professional athletes, sort of mentioning this idea over and over again. You got guys who are super talented, but they don't work hard, or females that are super talented, but they don't work hard. And you run into that one person that, like that Scatterboo kid. Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
Did you see? Woo,
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, he Texas got by the skin of their teeth for sure with that one. That Scatterboo kid is the truth. I mean that. We'll go to you next, Richard.
Yeah, I think the discipline, building healthy habits, building good habits, and staying consistent and proving to yourself that you could stick to something. I mean, that does wonders for yourself, right? Self-discipline is something that Scripture highly encourages. Several places it mentions how it's linked to how you could essentially have control over the body that you're given, right? And how that extends into other areas of your life, right? If you're able to take care of this vessel that you have essentially full autonomy for, then whenever anything happens externally, then you're going to be able to meet it better and stronger.
I may get in trouble for this, but there's something that I know I had a conversation with a fellow preacher friend about, and I won't mention any names, but I think a lot of preachers have issues with just being, overweight and having contracted some of these, diseases due to, a lack of care for the body and exercise and stuff like that. I think the principle that we can take from a passage of Scripture that says like, oh, well, how can you say you love God and you don't love your brother? Or you hate your brother. How can you say you love God if you hate your brother? Well, how can I say that, I'm a disciplined individual, but I can't discipline one of the most basic things that God has given me, and that's my body. It's just something I think about often. Like, you can't like refrain from just, shoving food in your mouth or, things of that nature, and not just caring for your body. And so that lack of discipline, even to something as basic as your body, I mean, we got to believe that extend into your spiritual life. I believe anyway.
I mean, how often is fasting linked to being a spiritual discipline? Right? Because it's a basic necessity.
Ooh.
Food is, right? And if yeah, I'll stop there.
Hey, look, I know that's what I'm trying to
see. That's a good point. Go ahead, Nis.
I'm trying to hold back from it, but it's just it's something that gets me every time, because I'm like, if we go and we begin to not prioritize the body and caring for the body, and then we just automatically assume ourselves to be spiritual. To me, it doesn't mix unless we, are hopping over to asceticism or something like that, and we're thinking the body to be evil. I think the outward manifestation that is our body is, in essence, teaching others, what we believe, is teaching others about our level of discipline. Because when I see, it doesn't have to be a super jacked person, but when I see a person that's in shape, sure, you may see the aesthetic appeal and all that, but I usually see a person that's disciplined. I'm like, that person has chose his or her heart, and the heart that they have chose is going to yield some benefits. And anyway, I ain't gonna hop on my hobby horse. Maurice, did you have anything to add to that?
You guys pretty much hit all the major points. Hebrews 12:11 says, "For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Yeah, I mean, show me a growing Christian following God's word, doing everything they can, and they don't have discipline. I mean, you're just not going to, right? You're not going to see that. So part of our responsibility with our body is to have that same mindset, because I mean, those things, our physical body can hinder our spiritual growth and our ability to work for the kingdom, right? Because our health is not in order. How many Christians are super strong in everything, evangelizing and edifying and being benevolent and all those sort of things, but their physical health has hindered them, right? Well, I can't do like used to anymore because I can't move as well as I used to. Well, I mean, barring any major injuries, most of us, God has designed our bodies to move until we die. We might move slower, but it's not that we're supposed to completely stop moving. And I think in our country, we have kind of accepted that. Well, if you go to other countries, the ones that we sometimes make fun of and say they're not as progressive as we are, well, those are the people who are 90, 95 years old, and they can do a full squat, right? And sit in a sitting position for a long period of time. But my point is, right, that's part of the culture and discipline a lot of times has a lot to do with that. So,
yeah, I agree. In fact, I don't know, I just think that people kind of see this retirement when they become of a certain age in the church. It's like, oh, well, my body doesn't move as well as it used to, so I can retire from doing a lot of that stuff that requires movement. I came across one song leader that purposely had all of these songs that he would ask the congregation, oh, all right, we're going to stand. And you could physically see people getting irritated just from doing, it was, but I was super excited. I was like, oh man, we're just doing sit to stands. That's what I'm talking about.
Holy squats.
Look, exactly. Look, but he got everybody to move, and that's the part I really like, because he said, well, just in case you're getting sleepy, I think we should, we're going to stand on this song as well. And
you better stand up. What we saying, stand up for Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm telling Don't break those Church of Christ traditions. Come on now.
Hey,
3 or 4 songs, prayer.
Hey, seriously, I'm telling you. But it is interesting. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna piggyback on that, what you're just saying, because I mean, I don't want to step on any toes either, but just it was a situation that I kind of dealt with before. Well, was around. My dad obviously been a preacher, and we used to do some door knocking. We used to door knock probably we door knock twice for sure at our congregation, for VBS and for our gospel meeting, just at our congregation alone, and during the summer, and then we would go out and help other people, other congregations. So I remember going like to Carthage, and things like that, different places in Georgia too, helping different congregations. But I remember we used to do almost a week of door knocking for our gospel meeting, and then we'd finish and then do something big on Saturday just with everybody. Thank everybody for coming out and stuff like that. And then our gospel meeting would start Sunday, so we'd do stuff like that. And I just remember after my dad got a preaching job elsewhere, that was part of I had some kids call me like, Destiny, man, we just had our end of the year meeting, and they're changing it. They're only going to door knock one time in the week, and then whatever, yada, yada. And the kids are mad because that was like our biggest thing. That was our, we're active and we're hyper and we're out and ready to run the streets and talk to people and be social. And they had their meeting, and one of the older people in the congregation, one of the ladies, was complaining about it. So apparently in the congregational meeting, she had a say in that being the case. And so just remembering that, and somebody who liked to complain about being out there. So even whenever we were doing door knocking for the week, we told her, just go drive. You can drive and bring water to people or do something like, but it was like that person, like that's what the kids are calling me. Like, hey, she said this, she said that. And so we're doing this now. And I'm like, okay. So only thing I can think of is exactly this. We were lazy, we're making excuses. We don't want to do this. We don't want to get out here. So now, no, it's not a sin to do it 4 days out of the week or 1 day out of the week for door knocking, but how many more people can we reach? We reach one community in a day. So we decided, okay, well, we have more flyers and we have more time. So let's go out and hit the following. So we lived in Kinder. So we did like Oberlin, and we did Elton, and we did like, different places like that. And so, especially in a small town, Louisiana, like, I mean, dude, it doesn't take that long to hit a whole, we could walk across Kinder in 30 minutes. And so, it didn't take, so like, so you guys understand what I'm saying when I'm saying with like, there should be no reason we couldn't get that done. I think this is important. Like, if your physical health, whether it's your knees hurting, or just because you haven't been active and all this stuff, is an excuse for you not to get out there. And I think we've also made the excuse not to door knock anymore, just for that reason alone, is that people, we're getting too old for this, or it doesn't work. I think everybody's like, it doesn't work, but I mean, I've never been at a campaign that some lives weren't touched, whether somebody got baptized or not, man. We had kids that used to hang out with us all summer just from door knocking for VBS. And I mean, I don't know, but that's the only thing I think of that. So every time we talk about how prioritizing our fitness could affect how we serve God in the church, that is like one of my number one, is just thinking about why are we taking door knocking out of this equation? Why are we not evangelizing anymore? What is the reason for that? It's easy to sit in the pew and get preached to or preach and that's it. And then go eat lunch, because all we're worried about is going to eat lunch after that, something unhealthy. But like, this is our habits now.
Yeah.
And it's not like go ye. That's all that Christ always talks about, is going. Like, go, be active, go your way, go do this. And so we're not going very much anymore. And I think it's highly because of our physical fitness right now.
Yeah, man, I agree. Rich, you had anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, that's good stuff. I mean, we validate stuff, even though that's the reason, right? We don't want to do it. We don't want to help our brother or sister out, clearing up their landscaping, or, helping them paint their houses, because we know we're going to get out of breath. But then we're like, oh, well, you could hire somebody to do that, and then you could evangelize to the person you hire, right? And so we validate not helping each other out with all this manual labor stuff. Being a youth minister for 5.5 years here in Texas, a lot of what we did was manual labor stuff. And seeing the kids wanting to get out of their house and doing something active and trying new things. Mm-hmm. Every week, every Saturday, we'd play basketball. And then getting them involved. Hey, they didn't like the gym. It may have been too intimidating for them. Okay, let's throw around a baseball. Let's go rock. Let's do something together. And they loved it. And I think there is this hunger within the church. I've seen it with young people, with young adults, college age. There is a hunger to still get out. And we're kind of taught, or that's kind of pushed out of our mind. and it's validated for what we think are good reasons. But really, it's just, we just want to be comfortable. We want to achieve comfort.
I agree. I definitely agree. You know, in a lot of ways, just to piggyback off what both of you said, is even as a youth minister here starting out, there were almost everything we did had a spiritual application, but it was always tied to their faith in motion. They needed to see their faith in motion. There had to, I mean, we can't just sit. I mean, I have young kids now, and like, you think you're about to teach them something and tell them to sit down? No, you have to learn on the go. Like that's the only way. And in fact, you know, I'm not ashamed to say, like, I've learned best by doing, like actually doing stuff. And so when it comes to like, you know, going out in the congregation, you're trying to move, whether that be to evangelize, talk to other people, help other people out when it comes to like benevolence and things of that nature. Man, I think it's evident that we want our religion the same way we want our food, microwavable. It's all microwavable.
Popping in the air fryer.
Look, yeah, just let's cook this real quick. And so that's why I like the idea of just looking at physical fitness as a discipline, because all of us having played sports, like, if you play sports, there's some tough times you're going to go through that it's going to build character. A verse that, you know, came to mind when studying for this was 1 Corinthians 9:24. And here Paul begins, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Now, one thing I wanted to point out was, you know, what Paul was alluding to here. Now, it's interesting. He's alluding to the training and performance of these Greco-Roman athletes, but he's, of course, to emphasize the discipline aspect of it. But it's interesting that most of their training, a great deal of their training and even athletic competitions took place in what we get our English word gymnasium. It took place in a gymnasion. And most literally translated, gymnasium means school for naked exercise. That's most literally translated is what it means. And so when you think about the school of naked exercise, you put that together, gymnasium was not just a place of physical exercise or physical fitness, but it was a space where the body and the mind were trained together. And so they looked at it, you know, as the Greeks, as we talked about earlier in the origin of physical fitness, the Greeks looked at being physically apt and physically active and physically fit just as important as being smart. So they looked at the aesthetic appeal of it too, but then they also understood that physical fitness was just as important. In fact, there's a book I have. It's called Physical Culture by this guy, and it's really good, Connor Hefferman. And he goes through just a lot of the history and origin of just physical culture, physical fitness in general. But one thing, even going back to what Paul stated, that I wanted to point out was, you know, the journey to physical fitness is unlocking. The fit body is often kind of seen as a solitary endeavor. Like, people think like, oh, I'm just going to go and move my body, and, you know, I don't have to have my mind focused on this area. Or they think, well, I'm motivated today, right? But what happens tomorrow when you're not motivated? And so again, that's where the discipline aspect comes into play. Like, how do we, in the same way that we may not feel up to worshiping God today? Now, I know no one is probably just going to say that, but it's like, you know, I don't feel like coming to church today. And you can just see it on people's faces. In the same way, I may not feel like going to the gym today. Well, but I still go to the gym. So how can I translate the discipline I have to go to the gym to church, and even vice versa, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do we translate that? I mean, how do we make that practical for Christians?
Yeah, I'm studying over this break I have before I start teaching again. I'm studying, it's called Sleep, Stress, and Recovery certification by a company called Precision Nutrition. I don't know if you guys have heard of Precision Nutrition before. It's probably arguably the most reputable nutrition certification out there for fitness professionals. And one thing that one of the big tenets or aspects of the beginning part of the certification is just this concept of, well, I have to be motivated first before I go do something. When it's actually the other way around, right? You go do it, then as you do it, that motivation, right, as you start seeing results and you start meeting people or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, I get to go because such and such is going to be there, or just, within the congregation, they're going to encourage me, right? They're going to edify me. Then your motivation is there or is developing. And then that discipline, right? That discipline comes into play as a result of that. So doing, motivation, discipline. That's kind of the way I guess I would put that. Go and do it first. The motivation comes, and then before you know it, 90 days down the road or whatever, 6 months down the road, you're consistently doing it, and right there's your discipline. And same thing happens as a Christian. You think when you first became a Christian, I remember at least when I was at one of the congregations in DC, we always taught new Christians, not you just come, keep coming, and you'll learn and you'll grow. The one thing we don't want a new Christian to do is get in the water and then they never come back, right? They're never around the saints, right? Because we've lost them. So if you come, that motivation happens, that discipline happens, right? And then you start to grow. So kind of how it looks.
My wife said something that was interesting when we had our first child. She said that the connection piece, like it took a minute because the baby was growing and all that stuff, but we didn't really know, this kid that she had just had. And of course it didn't take forever. She probably killed me if I say that, but it did take a minute, for the intimacy part to come where you felt like you were connected. Same for me, to feel like you were connected. And so I would just encourage Christians all the time. Like when you go to the gym or if you exercise, day one, you're probably not going to feel that intimacy with working out. In fact, it probably very well may feel terrible. You may want to divorce it immediately. It's like just, I had the luxury of, going to the gym with my father. And so I had that pre-exposure to it. But I just encourage people, just keep going. Like Maurice said, you gave a great 3-step plan. Just go, just show up. And then the motivation comes and then the discipline comes out.
Did you guys study the trans-theoretical models, like in school or anything like that? That's kind of what I always think about. And that definitely applies to your spiritual walk as well. I mean, especially when you talk about change. So we learn about behavioral changes and things like that. Obviously, we talk about SMART goals. That is just one of the biggest things that I talk to my clients about is just doing it. And just like Maurice said, man, sometimes you just got to get the process started. And like whenever you're in the pre-contemplation, the contemplation stage, like you recognize there's a problem. Clearly there's a problem, whether we're looking at our BMI or whether if it's in church, whether we're looking at, there's some things that we got to get right with, with God, it doesn't matter. But it's recognition first. And then even when you do the preparation stage, you may get a gym membership, you may get your shoes, how we talked about in the beginning, the fits are looking good and everything, make sure I have my running shoes, make sure I have my shorts and my sweats and everything. I'm about to have me a full Nike jogger set, track shoe with the breakaway pant, whatever you got to do, man. And you don't have that intention though yet. You're not, you're thinking about it. That's a problem. It's something you need to get started on, but it may not be intentional yet. You may not be in love, like you said, in love with it. That process is not there yet, but just doing it and it'll come. Like, the fake it till you make it type mindset, just get out there and do it. Like my old boss used to tell me, if you want to be higher up in the thing, like, right now you're a wellness coach. When I was working at the YMCA, and he used to tell me, just come in here looking a little more professional. And then one day you'll be one of the directors, stuff like that. And here we are now on business, so it's an idea to go ahead and get the process started, no matter, it's a problem, there's something that you need to start doing. So no matter if you're really in love with the idea yet, and then eventually it'll get to the maintenance stage where I'm telling everybody else about it. Oh, I know how to properly do this exercise. Oh, I know if you have high blood pressure, man, you need to come in here and do this, right? Besides just taking medicine for it, things like that start to happen. You start to get familiar with it and you help others too.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? That was good.
In terms of fitness, but also faith, baby steps are still steps.
Amen.
Still making progress.
Something that I wanted to add to that was, do you guys follow Melvin Ote on Facebook? So yeah, he mentioned something on Facebook a few days ago. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think he mentioned something about like the here and now, or something needs to happen. Oh no, here I just found it. In order to make progress someday soon has to become here and now. And so it's like, say again.
I remember that.
Yeah. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh, I said, ooh, that like for so many New Year's resolutions, like, some people wait. It's like they wait until like December 31. It's like, oh, I have like 10 more minutes left. I'm just gonna squeeze that in before 12 o'clock strikes. I've learned just in my short 27 years of being on the planet, that is, it's not the most effective approach, because that eventually, that mindset, that way of thinking is going to just bleed over into the next year. And like that first Friday of the year, I don't know if y'all noticed, it's like National Quit Day. It's like, it's done. It's like, oh, well, I tried it, but it's over. So we're trying to figure out the retention aspect, and the trans theoretical model is a perfect way. Like you go through those stages and kind of see. Any other thoughts on that before we go to the last one?
Yeah, when I teach that trans theoretical model, I think I teach that in my personal health class and my lifetime wellness class. I always emphasize that relapse part, although technically it's not one of the steps. It's kind of using it off to the side somewhere. But I help them to understand you should probably, expect that to happen.
For sure.
Even if you're like, oh no, I'm good. I'm rocking and rolling. You just never know what life is going to throw at you. So a relapse, that's just a time. What I heard somebody say is a setback is a setup for a comeback. So if you have that mentality and just understand that there's probably going to be a relapse, it doesn't mean you failed. No, it's just, everybody's not perfect. Get back up again and start again. So just want to emphasize.
I try to get clients to remember that too, because if you guys are gamers, it's kind of how you have your checkpoint, right? So you die, and then at least it'll bring you back to this one point. But that's kind of how I try to get them to think about it. Like, we all have to start somewhere. Like, Zig Ziglar said, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great, right? And so that's the biggest thing that I try to get clients to think about is, oh man, I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to do that. Well, your body, you still got the muscle memory. So it's not going to be as difficult to get back. If you never started, you never done it before. Same thing with me. I had a knee surgery, man. And that was the biggest thing for me. It almost like it's an identity theft type thing. Like, man, I can't run no more. I'm scared to even go. I was scared to go to the trampoline parks, like, just even after I was cleared by the doctor, because I'm just like, am I going to hyperextend my knee again? I'm like, and so it's a mental. So again, like we talked about in the beginning, like, it's very important to know that your mentality is everything. It is very important. But just knowing that, yes, there's a relapse stage, but sometimes you don't even have to think about it as that. There's just times where you're going to be stagnant, and don't think of it as a failure. Just think of it as, okay, we're another starting point. I'm still here. I'm not completely out of it, but we can start from here. What is my process from here? What does the beginning stage look like for me from here? Baby, like he said, like Richard said, baby steps are still steps.
Yeah. What is it? Proverbs 24:16. For the righteous falls 7 times and rises again, but the wicked stumble in times of calamity. You don't need to stay down.
Good stuff.
As we prepare to close, I just wanted to end on just some practical things for Christians as we or as to physical fitness. What are some spiritual lessons that we can draw from the various challenges during exercise? I know Destiny, if you wouldn't mind, I know this is kind of like the spur of the moment, but you mentioned something like your knee surgery and how, it was like an identity theft. And I think identity crisis is just something that is so, it's like an epidemic among emerging and young adults in the church today. And so how would you, what practical lessons, if you don't mind, what would you give just to encourage them to keep going even when they experience, relapse or, disappointment in some way?
Just from the spiritual aspect? Well, that hits home because I've talked about it before in ladies' classes too. Just the idea of being a preacher's kid, and sometimes just being a natural athlete. Okay, sometimes you're natural born athlete. You got the height, you got the muscle mass, you got everything, right? And so sometimes it's easier to do that as opposed to somebody. So you kind of look at it in the spiritual realm too. Sometimes it's easier when you're born into the Church of Christ, and you're born into whatever in the church. And you're raised that way. So it's easy. But I tell people all the time, I feel like you got more conviction whenever you weren't born in the church, or you didn't grow up in the church. For me, because I'm like now as an adult, like having to retest my faith and make sure that this is really the right. I mean, not that I would question it, but sometimes you do. Like, okay, am I a Christian because this is what my parents raised me to be, or is this really the right doctrine? You know, you're doing a lot of stuff. Like, I'm at 29 years old this month, and I'm okay. Am I really doing the right thing? Am I really on the right path? Am I, all this. And so sometimes it does, you have like an identity crisis, even as a young adult. Biggest thing is like continue to prove all things, even sometimes we just think about outside things, outside of our normal life, but you need to prove things that you're doing daily. What are your intentions behind what you're doing daily? Whether it's fitness, whether it's in your religious life too. Be intentional. Think about it. Like think about why you're doing it. Don't just do it. Don't just go through the motions. We talked about going to do it even if you don't have the intentions, but like once you're deep into it, you need to now realize that you need to be a little intentional about it. Because with me, even with my spiritual life and being a young adult, being an adult at this point, I still question things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't think that doubting or questioning things that you're doing and why you're doing it is a sin. Because I think sometimes we can get in that mindset that, oh, you're doubt. You don't have to say it. Oh, you don't, no, question it. Don't let yourself make excuses for not, serving God or anything like that. But definitely challenge yourself and ask yourself why you're doing it. Because you can get to a point to where you're like, is this all that I am? Or in, and so that's kind of where I've been for a couple of years right now. So like now I'm kind of in the, oh yeah, I'm good. I know that this is where I need to be. Need to give myself to God. This is how I need to do it. I'm not piggybacking off my parents' coattail with this anymore. This is who I am. If I miss service on Sunday, it's because of me. It's not because of my parents. And so, but it's okay. Like I said, don't think that questioning anything like that is wrong. I think that's where a lot of people start to doubt themselves and wonder who they really are. You're supposed to at some point.
Man, sis, I appreciate that. I could look at you and feel your energy with that. Thank you. That wasn't scripted, y'all. That's real right there. That's raw. I'm telling you. I felt that. I'm telling you. Did anyone want to add to the idea, just providing as we close, just these practical spiritual lessons from the various challenges that we may face during like exercise, physical fitness?
Sticking with it goes a long way. Accept it. See yourself in it. And as soon as you get plugged in and take on responsibility, then the world will open up to you. Just stick with it. Push through.
Yeah. Well, I was going to add was what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. And that was something that our football coach used to say that all the time. When we went in and worked out, he just so happened to be our football coach and strength and conditioning coach, like he knew anything about strength and conditioning, but we're not going to go there.
That's the typical right now.
I know. I'm like, what in the world? We go in the weight room. I just felt like this dude is putting a plan together to get us injured. But anyway, but he did something good did come out of that. What doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. And I would just encourage people, like, as we go into 2025 and we're looking at, how much scripture are we reading? How we, Maurice, I saw you put up the sermons that you listened to last year. Like that stuff is very encouraging. And the fact that you had the list of all the sermons, like looking at that. The fact that it's a measurement of some kind that you can go back and look at what you've done. And that right there is encouragement alone. You can see like, all right, I've done it before. Then I have the wherewithal to do it again. Right. And so that's how I kind of look at it. So as we enter the new year, just kind of think of that. Think of, measuring out the things that you've done successfully and allow that to motivate you to face, newer challenges. So
try to combine the two together if you can. So try to combine your faith and your fitness together. That has really worked for me. Speaking of the sermon, the 2024 was my 4th year in a row of listening to a sermon every day. And when I decided to do that goal, I said, well, how can I, because obviously it's going to take time, right? So, well, how can I combine that with my fitness? Like, can I I'm going to be up early in the morning, right? Instead of me, because I usually do like foam rolling and stuff like that, and kind of movement prep stuff. I said, all right, well, I can still pray. I can read, meditate, and then right when I go into my prep work, I could just turn the TV on, watch a sermon, or turn my phone on to listen to a sermon. If I don't finish it, I can take that with me to the gym or whenever I start my exercise. Just trying to find ways of, because usually it's like sometimes it's a time thing for people in order for them to, I don't have the time. How can you incorporate that in, are you reading your Bible? Yeah, I read my Bible. Are you studying? Yeah, I study. Well, is there any way you can throw fitness into that? Somehow, some way, right? Can you walk? Can you, whatever you can. So I recommend, strongly encourage people to try to put those two together if you can. It's not going to work every time, right? Like if you're in some deep study and you're not going to be able to be banging out a workout. If you're trying to, find the answer to marriage, divorce, or remarriage, you're probably not going to be able to do that while you're working out. But I think you guys you get my point, right? Just generally speaking, it works. So that's my encouragement for our listeners.
Yep, and that's the whole point of the podcast, right? We're trying to integrate it. So if anything, listen to us. That's the big look. Listen, hey, look.
We are.
Look, we can give. Look, I'm just saying, yeah, like give it. Listen to us. I mean, we're trying our best to just integrate the spiritual and the physical here. And so, I really appreciate y'all, and thank you for the conversation. It's been great, just continuing to collaborate with you all. And of course, we hope you, the listener, you find benefit and value in today's episode. And we look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions, of course, you can leave comment under wherever you get your podcast, on the YouTube page, Facebook page, and we'll be sure to get back and answer those, whether in the comments or in the next episode. And without further ado, thank you all so much for tuning in to the Lightweight Strength Academy podcast. Peace.